In a great irony, Neville Maskelyne, Harrison's chief rival, had been sent to Barbados months earlier to make careful, land-based, moons of Jupiter observations for the purpose of determining the correct longitude. Maskelyne was quick to accept the assignment, but he had his own agenda. He planned to use the trip as a trial of his lunar method. Working away in the tropical night, Maskelyne toiled with his instruments. It was reported that several of Barbados' prominent citizens heard him boast that his lunar distance system was superior to any clock, and might itself win the £20,000 longitude prize when he returned to England. Besides the glory, there was a great deal of money at stake.
The misunderstanding begins when Harrison arrives in Barbados in May 1764. The principal purpose of this voyage was to test his father's timekeeper, which his father had taken a lifetime to build.
The testing of the clock in Maskelyne's hands was bound to be thorough, but would it also be fair and objective?
William and his father, John Harrison, knew that Neville Maskelyne was very interested in the lunar distance method. He was a good astronomer, and they didn't complain before the voyage that he'd been chosen as the principal person to make the observations on the island to determine the success of his timekeeper. However, when William Harrison arrived in May 1764, he found out that Maskelyne had been talking a great deal about the lunar distance method. William Harrison created quite a scene. He didn't want Neville Maskelyne to do any observations. This was an enormous slur on Maskelyne's character, and Maskelyne resented it bitterly.
Maskelyne's boasting had created an appearance of conflict of interest. A century-long quest for longitude had come down to a contest between the work of two stubborn men on the beaches of a remote tropical island. At the moment of noon, just as the sun reached its highest point over Bridgetown, William Harrison prepared to unlock H4's case. The clock had not been reset for 46 days. At that same moment, the watch indicated that it was 3:55 p.m. back in Portsmouth. At 15 degrees of longitude per hour, the clock placed the harbor at Barbados just under 60 degrees west of Portsmouth, only a few miles from what we now know to be its actual position.
When you imagine that the most accurate watch that you could buy in the 18th century was accurate within only a minute a day, Harrison produced this watch. It went to the West Indies and back, and after a 6-week voyage, this thing was accurate within about 30 seconds of time. This is just unheard of.
At the meeting of the Board of Longitude in January 1765, along with the official news of the success of John Harrison's fourth marine timekeeper, came the devastating news to Harrison that Neville Maskelyne was to be appointed Astronomer Royal.
With Maskelyne now able to influence the board, Harrison's hope that H4's performance would quickly gain him the prize began to fade. To the members of the board, the clock's very accuracy was cause for suspicion.
They're either government appointees or from the Royal Navy or professors from universities. They just didn't understand mechanics. I think they were frightened of it. It was a system of solving the longitude problem that they couldn't really cope with. They could understand an astronomical problem, but the very idea of a mechanical timekeeper that was so good was just too good to be true. They couldn't accept it.
As far as the members of the Board of Longitude were concerned, there was no particular vendetta against Harrison. in some ways these people were far too boring for that kind of exercise. But at this stage, they really believed that their solution was best and that these tick-tock clocks simply could not be believed.
So just imagine today that the government introduced an award of, say, £1 million for someone who could produce a 2-litre motor car that could do 1,000 miles to the gallon. We all laugh at the idea. But supposing someone from the remote regions of the country comes down to London with a car and he says to the government, this car will do 1,000 miles to the gallon. Where's my £1 million? And they say, oh, come on, what's under the bonnet? Oh, I want my £1 million, then I'll tell you. And so the arguments start. He's not going to tell you what's under the bonnet because he knows perfectly well someone's going to pinch the idea. And Harrison was in exactly the same position.
On the instructions of Neville Maskelyne, Harrison's timekeepers were carted away for further tests. This left Harrison deeply discouraged.
Justice, as touching my reward or encouragement, has been scandalously frustrated. Mr. Graham said to several gentlemen that I deserved the £20,000. Yet the board has turned me into a slave. Well, they took great care about my watch, for they also locked it up for some time in a closet at the Admiralty because it had performed 2 voyages so well. And so they would keep it as a piece of treasure, for fear nobody else would ever be able to make another. It's a fair sign indeed that they did not understand it. Nay, my timekeeper is beyond the reach of both the latitude and the longitude of these villainous priests of Cambridge and Oxford. The trouble which these lunar men have occasioned me.
Finally, in 1772, Harrison's son wrote a letter to George III, pleading on behalf of his father. The two Harrisons were soon granted an audience with the King of England. The monarch must have been moved by the men's story, because he whispered to an aide, "These 2 people have been cruelly wronged." And then, turning to face father and son, he cried out for all to hear, "By God, Harrison, I shall see you righted."
I think it was very difficult for Harrison, and I think after all those years of willing struggle to have finally succeeded and met many unfair demands to push the project through extra trials and repeat replica performances, to get the money grudgingly, but never the full trumpet fanfare, "Yes, you did it, well done," must have left him feeling terribly bitter and disappointed, because it was always the principle of the thing with him.
And so, 43 years after a young John Harrison first traveled to London, a reluctant Parliament, at the insistence of the King, awarded him the full £20,000.
I can boldly say that no timekeeper, whether in the pendulum way or that of the balance, can ever be able to go any truer or better than mine. And now, at sea, the longitude may be had with great certainty and exactness. I have indeed had a long deal of labour, but I thank God I've got it through.